I'd like to welcome Jed Carroll. He is a guru on brand building and advertising, working with some of the bigger brands in the tech world, but also across consumer brands. So he is going to be able to give us a fantastic insight into the world of proper advertising, as I call it. Advertising campaigns um, that we know and love from our youth, but also where the world of advertising is leading to today. Welcome, Jed, and it'd be great if you could just talk me through a little bit about what you're doing at the moment, what your challenges are, and then we can get into a few questions, if I may.
Thank you for having me on, first of all, Miles. At the moment, I am wrapping up an engagement with Google Cloud, and I've been working with their internal creative agency. I'm what's known as a temporary vendor contractor with those. Um, the work that I'm doing is very much focused actually on the brand building side of things for Google Cloud. So that is, we're looking at out of home advertising, we're looking at a lot of video advertising, we do a lot of events, um, and thinking about how those creative experiences really come to life. Um, and those events are a mix of major trade shows as well as Google hosted events. There is sports sponsorship. So, for instance, um, I've been doing work on the Formula E sponsorship activation. That Google Cloud actually has. So even though it's a B2B brand, a lot of them tactics will actually be exposed to more than the direct customers that Google Cloud is likely to have.
Fantastic. Oh, well, that's fascinating. Um, so talking about brand building, because this seems to be for a lot of brands, this is something that they aren't investing enough in. Uh, could you talk me through why brand building is so important and how it sits apart from, I think, what you call brand activation or performance marketing, which is I would argue the sort of the obsession, certainly in B2B, but I'd be interested a bit more about brand building and why it's important, why it should really weigh out higher at the moment, particularly against brand activation.
So I think first of all, I'll address the issue of why a lot of brands actually do brand building and then explain, brand activation, and then explain why brand building is important. So a lot of the reasons why brands do um, uh, focus on performance marketing, brand activation, is that they're measured very much on 90-day periods, and they can, at a very simple place, you can actually go, here's the money I spent, here's what's actually come out of it. And they have measures on that. And some of them measures might be um, cost of acquisition for a customer, or it might be things that they hope correlates with that. So engagement where people have actually been moved down a notional customer journey along a marketing funnel. Um, and those seem like very concrete measures. Um, so why should you do brand building? Well, I can understand why a lot of smaller B2B brands won't necessarily want to do brand building, first of all. And the reason why that is they undergo something about what Byron Sharp, who's a professor at the Erinsberg Bass Market Institute, calls double jeopardy. And the double jeopardy basically means that you, as a smaller brand, you have less market penetration. So you're in less places, you have less customers, and um, those customers are probably less loyal.
Right.
Um, And so that's the reason why, for instance, small enterprise software companies will have a lot more difficult time um, moving the needle than larger enterprise software companies. There's certain other attributes in that particular example as well, in that you buy software on an 8-year cycle. You want to make sure that the people are around in 8 years, things like that. But you'll tend to find that they'll either be, they might get to a niche and then they'll find it very hard to break out of it. And the thing is that the bigger you are, the better you'll do. So it has a
Yeah,
kind of like a flywheel type effect.
got it, got it, got it.
Um, so I can understand why they, if you like, they don't break out of that, or that it's very, very hard for them to actually break out of that. Um, the thing that actually really helps um, get your product bought is what's known as mental availability. So if I think about if I think about business to business PR, my first thought you'll want me to have is miles.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, and if we think about lots of other brands, there will be brands that you'll immediately think of. So, for instance, chocolate, Cadbury's, you're
Mm,
less likely to think about, or you'll probably mention it further down the line, Thornton, etc., etc.
yeah,
In
Nestle, or yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm,
And if we think about business to business software for a moment, the amount of people that have used AWS and the amount of developers that are experienced with AWS will mean that if they're thinking about firing up a new instance, the majority of them will think AWS.
hmm.
And if
Okay.
it was 15 years ago, that probably would have been Microsoft, because they might have been Microsoft certified. They would be experienced with SharePoint, Outlook, um,
Mm, 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 mm.
the Internet Server application that Microsoft used to have, etc., etc.
Got it.
Um,
Yeah.
so it affects these things in these ways. There are lots of other business to business brands that might do very niche things, and their fame is actually consequently smaller because of the niche they're in.
Yeah. No, I sympathize with that. I mean, I've worked with several brands that have become fairly famous in particular markets, and then they've tried to break out into what they've called adjacent markets within, say, financial services, and then they've really, really struggled because they're
Yeah,
going from a base of pretty much zero because they haven't built the brand. Yeah.
yeah, and
Mm,
that's a challenge, because you then get a chicken and egg situation of, do you put the money in to do that, or do you try and do a kind of a cargo cult approach and try and replicate what's worked for you in the past? And what's
mm,
worked
mm,
for me in the past has probably been a confluence of good luck and right place at right time, as well as good practice. And don't get
mm,
me wrong, all of them things you do need to have.
mm, 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 mm,
Um, but a lot of overnight successes often might be decades in the making. So if we think about B2B networking and telecoms and enterprise computing, um, Huawei seemed to spring up from nowhere. Yet
mm.
Huawei was actually a business that's 4 decades old. And yes, it did have help from banks and financing, which meant that its vendor financing was actually discounted their product rather than accrued interest on top of it.
Okay.
But they provided a good enough product so that when people ran the numbers, it kind of made sense. But breaking that one customer in BT then meant that they suddenly became famous and they went wider.
Mm,
Um,
mm, mm.
so despite what Xi Jinping would like to think, it wasn't just the Chinese Communist Party that made them. They did a lot of the good groundwork, but that thing that cracked them, that was that fame aspect of things.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
Interesting. Yeah. So brand
so
building is critical, and I think you were saying earlier that in a typical online business, a sort of a SaaS type business today, you should be probably investing something like 70 or even 75% of the marketing in brand building.
So, of the heuristics,
Mm,
a subscription business. So, SaaS is a
mm,
classic subscription
yeah.
business.
Mm,
Um, about 70% would go
mm,
into brand building, 30% go into brand activation.
yeah. Mm,
Now, I mean, brand building can also be things like PR. So, one of the key things that I'm thinking about when we're actually doing our projects is um, how can we how can we make this idea work for earned as well? So
yes.
I don't want to have something that's just like looks great on a 48 sheet poster,
Yeah.
um, or looks great as a YouTube video. It's then how can that will that idea or that campaign idea scale so that it can be implemented in what we call earned media, but basically PR and talkability as it would have been called in the old days. But
Yeah. And now I guess it's called integrated campaigns, aren't they? I think that's what one or
so in
two people call it.
So, I mean,
Mm,
integrated campaigns has been an idea has been around for probably 30 years. So you hear people used to talk about media neutral
mm,
strategies and integrated campaigns because obviously your your paid media will work a hell of a lot hard for you if you have a lot of talkability around it. And that
yes.
talkability comes from, having people talk about it at the water cooler, having people talk about it in trade magazines or trade websites, newspapers, news websites, sharing that they've seen it on social media, etc.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. And some of that is going to be about, so it starts with brand building. So it starts with the principles of, well, great advertising that in this book look out. They were focused on the sort of right brain thinking, if you like. Maybe it's worth taking a step back and just talking a bit about that, the sort of right versus left brain and the tussle that's now ongoing in the advertising world around that, and how to address it really.
The world of marketing in general and the world of media has changed enormously over several decades. Um, the way we think has been hardwired into us by evolution and evolved over thousands of years since we could get eaten by predators. So, sitting there and procrastinating about choices and being analytical about them is something it's like a lot of a cognitive load. And, if you were there thinking about, do I want to have this or this? Or, you could have been eaten by a wolf by the time you've actually made up your mind.
Yeah,
Um,
time you've selected the next iPhone, you're dead. Yeah,
yeah,
that's right.
exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Um, so that means that that kind of, if you like, logical thinking,
Mm,
Daniel Kahneman called system two thinking, um, is something that's, if you like, an artificial kind of construct. However, that actually fits in to the way often B2B marketers actually want to communicate because they want to communicate very, very rational benefits in a very, very rational way, um, and see how we're much better than our competitors. Um, so what in fact happened from a human evolution point of view is that we developed um, a kind of like a thinking that's much more instantaneous, and emotions tap into that instantaneous thinking.
mm,
So an example of that instantaneous thinking would be if I feel something sharp on my foot, I will instantly lift my foot off it. Um, if something makes me feel angry, I will walk away from it, or I will ball my fists up in my pocket. Or if I didn't have pockets, if we were going back to that primitive, I would have probably decked someone.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
Depending how extreme it was, etc., etc. Um,
Mm,
but that's that kind of system one thinking. And when we go and do lots of things, um, that's the reason why, for instance, we might not remember our journey to work unless something really significant happened.
yeah. Yeah.
Because a lot of the time we run on that system one level emotional thinking. Um, the way um, a lot of advertising works at the moment is that they try and think of us as logical decision makers, rather in the same way that, and rational decision makers in the same way that economics does. And that then means if we're going through step by step by step, there is a temptation to actually measure those steps. And then I've then got something to say, look, I spent X amount of million of my marketing budget, and here's what I got.
Yeah.
Um, However, things that make us feel actually um, have much more of a long-term impact.
Mm,
So, if I walk down a road and felt sharp stones, I'm going to think about making myself a set of bark sandals next time I go down
mm,
that path with the sharp stones,
mm,
because it's actually built a longer term thinking of things around that, and that's what advertising traditionally tapped into. And that's the reason why you see brands like Accenture or Google Cloud, for instance, will try and attach themselves onto emotional events through things like sports sponsorship. It's the reason why um, consumer adverts try to hook you with emotional storytelling and tension or humor,
mm, mm, mm. Yeah.
because that taps into that builds longer term memory structures, and then means that, when you think about a given thing, you'll automatically have that association with it, which then means that since they've had that, you'll at least consider that for purchase.
Mm, absolutely. It's in the mix. It's in the
Yeah.
top three or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of procurement processes try and short circuit that.
Hmm.
And so that, whether it's trying to short circuit the salesman that builds a really good rapport with a customer, so if I want databases, I'll go to Sheila.
Mm,
Um,
sure.
do they, so they'll have a structured procurement process to try and take it in a rational point of view. But for a lot of products, the organizational load as well as the cognitive load means that um, that will still get short circuited. So, for instance, are you really going to be that bothered about where you buy your paper clips? Probably not. It's more about if you need paper clips now, you want to have paper clips now.
Yeah. So you go to
Um,
the fastest place that you know, sort of to get it. Yeah.
yeah. And also, brand building can at least get you in to that um, procurement shortlist that they will then do that shorter to that more rational assertion on, so it actually gets you to a good way of where you're actually going. A second reason why the so there's a measurement aspect there, there's a logical aspect there. What it doesn't get is the emotional aspect that we've talked about, but also another thing it doesn't get is that people aren't in the mood to buy your product, or they're not in the market to buy your product 95% of the time. So unless you build them longer memory structures and you're continually in front of them, you're not even going to be considered when they actually are in the market to buy your product.
Yes. So the challenge, obviously, for a smaller company is um, they aren't going to be able to take great billboard ads, out of home billboard ads. They're probably not going to be able to go on TV. They might even think video ads are too expensive. So
or running a press office or yeah.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So what would you advise in those situations? I mean, I obviously what I do, I suppose, is a brand of PR which is about sort of offering thought leadership, offering education, um, and that this is the route that a lot of tech businesses have gone down. So they've sort of said, well, you're obviously not in the market for our AI solutions right now, whatever it is. Um, but in the meantime, would you be interested to know a bit more about how to build prompts in your market? You know, if you were using ChatGPT or Google Gemini um, next week. And of course, people are interested in that. So therefore, and then if the problem gets too big for them or they get some budget to do something, then they're going to be thinking of that supplier. So, I mean, would you describe that as brand building? I mean, I describe it as thought leadership, but would you sort of put it in the brand building camp?
So it could be brand building. The question is, whose brands is it building?
Yeah, because it
You
could be
know,
building the LLMs, the models brands as well, same time.
it could be building the models brand.
Mm,
So to digress a little,
mm.
um, my mum, the way she Googles is she basically phones me and she says, Jed, can you ask Google about?
Okay. Yeah.
And then I'll go and give her the websites.
Okay. Mm,
And, it'll usually be things like crochet patterns and things like that.
mm.
And I send them through, and I don't know which is good and which is bad.
No.
So she doesn't blame Google if she gets bad crochet patterns based on what she's asked me to look for. She
Mm,
blames the websites. She doesn't actually use Google herself,
okay.
but she has that association of um, Google giving her what she wants.
But
Um,
it's actually you. You're the search engine.
and if you think
Yeah.
about it, the AI models now reduce our cognitive load by doing that. So there might well be a transference of brand equity to them from the brand. I was actually more thinking about when you talked about that thought leadership aspect is are you building that person's personal brand or are you building the brand that they are attached to when you're actually doing that thought leadership work?
Yes, I mean that's a very interesting question because a lot of what I do is what I would describe as personal brand building. So in
Yeah.
other words, it's for the chief executive or it's for the CTO of, you know, the leader of a software business. And he is expressing the vision and the direction of the business through this thought leadership. So in a way, it's personal brand, but it's stretching beyond that. He's representing the company, if you know what I mean, in a very public way through his thinking and views and opinions.
But when you take it
Mm.
below that CEO level, when you're actually looking at, for instance, maybe vice president of sales for Northern Europe or things like that,
Mm.
um, is it then his brand that you're building um, rather than the company's brand? Particularly when you think about the amount of business development people and the way they actually might move around between companies as their career progresses, with someone who might be in the C-suite, in particular the CEO or the CTO, they actually might be um, founder managers,
Yes, which is different because they're going to
which
be
is
around for longer, obviously, and they're not going to be
yeah.
immediately on the
Whereas
hunt. Mm.
CEOs that might be shipped in later on, often, by the people who've actually financed the business, so VCs and things like that, they actually might be, if you like, professional CEOs that might
Mm.
do a few years here, a few years there,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
as
You
they
know, the
move.
average tenure of a CEO that's brought in is probably only about 2 years, isn't it now?
I
So
mean,
yeah.
it varies by sector and what have you, but
Mm.
there are someone like Tim Cook has been, or Cheryl Katz, if you think about Oracle,
Mm.
they've been in place for, good long times. But there are those kind of considerations that put in there. But at the end of the day, you have to make trade-offs to actually, um, make whatever you can, because there's I mean, B2B marketers are in a tough position in that um, there's they don't have that many good decisions to make. They have dilemmas,
Yes.
and it's
So,
it's about making the best choice within those dilemmas.
mm, absolutely.
I
Um,
realize that was a bit of a long answer, but hopefully,
no, that's it's really helpful to sort of try to scan across from the world of advertising into B2B marketing, and there are definitely parallels, but there are also, yes, different challenges to do with. Well, it is partially to do with budget, if I'm honest. So, I mean, also the nature of the media has changed so much. I mean, it wasn't that long ago. If you go back, say, 15 years ago, a lot of the clients that I would have worked with would have also been taking display advertising out, in trade publications, whole pages. So they were seeking to build brand, not simply flog product. Um, so there was a sort of natural um, nod to brand building, to corporate brand building, as we called it, which in the digital world, people obviously think is harder to pull off. Um, and the tendency is to go towards content marketing. Um, and maybe again, this is the left brain winning out a little bit. The goal orientation. Have X number of people reacted to this? Have they downloaded that white paper 10 times this month? It tends towards that, the performance marketing thinking that we talked about earlier. Is that just where marketing, or more widely, is that just where business is at the moment? We're in a sort of uh, a short-term, goal-orientated way of thinking. Um, is that a wider cultural problem? Is the
so
other point.
I think there's a few things that are in there that I'm going to try and unpack for you. First of all, it's not strictly a B2B, B2C problem
Hmm.
or challenge. Um, it's a there's a few things that's going on. One, we measure what measures can actually be coded and the technologists can actually make happen.
Hmm.
And people who often have built these ad tech stacks aren't basing it on marketing science. They're basing it on the fact that they're basing it on interactivity. If someone has done something, we are making an assumption that the next thing is going to happen.
Yeah, the sort of
Yeah.
sales funnel concept, if you like.
Yeah.
Eventually, yeah, yeah.
And we can have a whole discussion about the way the sales funnel is it's an interesting mental model, but
Mm.
its relation to reality is completely different, and it actually comes out of door-to-door sales a century ago, when people were supposed to take a customer through one end of the funnel to the other end of the funnel in a single discussion. So it was
Okay.
basically a salesman's aid memoir, and then it then appeared, then between um like Microsoft PowerPoint Smart Art,
Yeah.
it then became a common lingua franca that we all kind of had, and was useful, despite the fact that it actually might not bear any relation to reality,
Yes.
because it assumes perfect memory, rational decision making, all of those kind of
Yeah, and I think what you're sort of saying is, if you're doing the brand building, on in a consistent way, then you can short circuit so much of that
Yeah,
sales funnel. You're basically going to go straight to sale at the point where you want to pick up a beer, you're going to go to Heineken because that's in your mind, and
yeah.
form an association.
Or you Heineken, there's these other ones in the fridge, and you're going to go to, you might have glanced at the other ones, but Heineken is the one you know. So
Exactly.
that consideration process has shrunk down a hell of a lot.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
Now, B2B marketing puts a little bit more time into that consideration process and tries to put a framework around it, at least for items above a certain value.
Yeah.
But it means that you can at least get into that consideration process a hell of a lot faster.
Yeah.
In the way that you actually do that, getting back to your point about regularity is very, very important because you want to reach people if you're doing brand building the 95% of the time when they're actually not ready to buy, as well as the 5% when they are ready to buy.
Yes. Yeah.
It's the reason why in the consumer world, advertising just doesn't happen on Thursday evenings when people are about to go out to the supermarket with their paycheck to buy
Yeah.
their weekly groceries.
No, very good. And I mean, the next thing I was going to get into was the what in the Lookout book they talk about sort of the narrowing and the fragmentation of attention and how one tries to deal with that in advertising as well as more generally in marketing. Um, are there any ways through on that, or do we just have to work with that?
So I think there's two splits. I think the way that question breaks down is in two ways. In We have more opportunities for media now than we've had in the past.
Mm,
Um, so if you think about media in the past, it would have been a newspaper that you may or may not have picked up on your way to work, or in the canteen at lunchtime, or during a coffee break at work. Um, you might have seen some out of home on your commute to and from work, and you will probably watch some TV or listen to radio in the evening, maybe the breakfast time on your way to work.
mhm.
Um, Now, the reason why it's fragmented is now we've got smaller gaps of media consumption time to actually fill.
Yeah.
So, previously, if you're on the tube, as I am going into work, you might have seen the adverts that you'd be staring at while you've got someone's armpit in your face.
Yeah.
Whereas now people might be flicking through a copy of the Metro, or more likely, they're actually on their smartphone. So
Mm,
those are smaller bits of media that have actually been filled in.
got it.
Unless you have a lot of repetition within that media, you're less likely to actually build memory structures,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, which will get you that brand building aspect. You'll also have a lot less likely way of actually making that media memorable because you might actually have to get some sort of emotion and the brand in front of the consumer, possibly in a 6-second spot. For some of
Very,
that,
very challenging. Yeah.
them smaller media elements, then you need to think about it in a more integrated way. In that you have emotion and storytelling in longer form things. So it might be, for instance, if you think about B2B, in a um, text driven, branded content spot, or a well copyright written print ad.
Mm, mm, mm,
Um,
mm,
you might have maybe video content, and it might be a documentary on how the NHS managed to solve X and X problem with whatever database.
Yeah, of course.
Um, and you can then put classic storytelling in there. So there is a challenge, a um, a hero, uh, an enemy, points of tension. Classic storytelling as we're used to.
Yeah.
Within that, um, you then would have shorter bits of content that actually might either direct people to that longer bit of content
Yeah.
or have enough of it in that it reminds you of that content that you've already seen. Now, within the B2C world, that's easier to do because we can actually hang lots of brand cues on top of it. So, music, um,
Mm,
a mascot or personality kind of character. So, the Dell guy, um,
yeah.
Tony the Tiger for um,
Yeah.
uh,
The funny meerkat
Frosties. Yeah,
that we
yeah, the
go compare.
meerkat. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So we've got social, we've got those kind of like fluent objects that we can hang things around. Music is very good because it's emotive. A particular
Mm.
style of copywriting, which The Economist historically had been very good at. Uh,
Apparently, animals is very useful. Apparently.
yeah, uh, fonts,
Yeah.
fonts, colors, things like that,
Mm.
can all work. Um, can all work really well.
Got it. Yeah. So there's
Um,
cues.
so you need to think about them cues, but if you're going to build them cues, you need to basically be prepared to, stay with them cues and actually use them consistently. Uh,
Yes.
One of the things that marketers tend to forget is, oh, I've landed this campaign, I'm going to do another campaign next quarter. And it's like, you might think you've landed that campaign and you're sick and tired of it because you've seen it every day.
Mm. Mm.
Your audience, they won't have seen that.
No. They
And
stick with it. Basically, is what you're saying.
yes, stick
Mm.
with it. So, you'll
Mm.
often, if you look in the consumer world, a lot of adverts are still running. So, my dad's favorite advert at the moment is the Twix advert with the two bears looking at the two twins, and they're both eating Twix. And the humor in isn't it is
Mm.
that as they're talking about the different aspects of the Twix, the two guys, the bears are looking at them and thinking about how they would actually have a similar kind of thing to the Twix, like the sound of it breaking. And yeah, so there's a certain
Yeah,
dark
it's a bit of
humor in there
humor.
that,
Exactly.
yeah, but like it appeals to children who,
Mm.
who like things like horrible histories and stuff like that. And
Mm.
it appeals to children at heart, adults.
Mm.
Um,
I haven't seen that one, so I'll have to look that one up.
Yeah,
Mm.
but I mean that one can in 2022, it's still running now. If you look at things like the Flash TV adverts, they've basically had the same dog in the advert and the same kind of families and Queen's Flash Gordon
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
soundtrack
Yeah.
reinterpolated for their thing. Um, for the past 4 or 5 years.
Mm.
Um, Great campaigns, particularly at brand building level, burn in rather than burn out. So you
Okay.
can change your performance marketing campaigns to the brand activating ones over time in terms of, you know, I guess that the classic thing at the moment is going to be, um, you know, X product now with AI agents that make you even more efficient.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So your performance marketing might focus on the fact that it now has this new AI agent feature, but um, it's still the same brand that people had, you've built that association up
Mm.
that does
Mm.
those different things. This will vary enormously. Obviously, if you're a new brand, because you're building associations, but for a lot of people, SAP have been around, multiple decades.
Mm.
Microsoft have been even longer. I mean, one of the problems you've got with Microsoft is which is the brand? Is it Microsoft? Is it Windows? Is it
Bill Gates.
Windows
Mm.
11?
Mm.
Is it? a particular service on Azure. So you get these enormously deep brand structures
Yes.
that you don't tend to see in a lot of consumer industries. So your washing powder, do you actually know it's made by Unilever? No, but you probably know that your washing powder, you know probably which brand of washing powder you probably prefer.
Mm, mm, mm,
So there's a brand structure aspect to that as well.
mm.
Um, but I would say that those lower order aspects of the brand are more important in performance marketing, but it needs that halo of the brand building around the main brand that you're using.
Yeah, so there's a corporate
Yeah.
brand followed by
So,
the product brands almost.
or,
Yeah.
or you have a house of brands and it would be, the equivalent of Surf washing powder now washes whiter. So it might be X database now AI ready, now agentically now with agentic AI, etc., etc. So it
Mm,
might be that you actually look at your product range and not try and put Salesforce into every product name, but you actually promote each product name separately, and then
mm,
the different features that you actually have on them, you have that as you have them features highlighted in the performance marketing, but you continually then to promote that product name. Um,
got it.
but
Yeah.
that's a whole other problem of, you know, I can understand why it might come about. For instance, if you're IBM, where people are obviously will always buy IBM in their minds. Um, but when you start get down to WebSphere, and it then gets so lost in that kind of tract. So there's a tension there in brand architecture, as well as which effective channels that you actually use as well, and what you're actually attaching the audience to.
Oh well, it's been a fascinating discussion, I have to say. I think we could go on a lot longer, but I know you've got a party to go. Well, a gathering followed by a
So
pub
I've got to,
gathering. Yeah,
yeah. So
yeah,
I've got to
yeah.
pick someone off the airport and a gathering to go to.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, it's that time of the year. But thank you very much for taking the hour, Jed. I found it fascinating actually to dip into the world of advertising and then cross refer to the brand building and performance marketing that we do on the B2B side. And yeah, lots to think about. And yeah, and hopefully we can get a bit more right brain thinking going. By the sounds of it, that sounds like that's where it's at in terms of brand building. So that will be my big takeaway, I think, of this one. Yeah, thank you very much indeed for your time.
Thank you for having me,
Mm.
Miles, and I look forward to hopefully chatting to you again in the future.